Karl Marx was the oldest of 9 children. He was a very smart man who read the writings of many people such as George Hegel and Bruno Bauer. These influences helped to shape how he looked at things, particularly reality. Karl Marx believed that history was based upon material conditions rather than based in beliefs. Has said, "It is a grandiose version of the world without gods, in which the person who is the true source of every society, all politics, the world of ideas, and history. The person was its actual and also dispossessed and alienated causa sui, the truth of which, however, could only be recognized once criticism had opened the person's eyes." Shortly after writing the Communist Manifesto in 1847 with Engels, the Communist League was formed. During this time in Berlin, he published many writings that many people did not agree with, and they had him deported to Brussels, Germany in 1845. During the 1860s, much of Marx's focus was on the American Civil War. Marx connected the use of slavery to capitalism. Marx didn't consider ancient slavery the same as modern slavery, instead noting that modern slavery was a system in capitalism. He says on slavery, "Slavery is an economic category like any other. Needless to say, we are dealing with with direct slavery, with Negro slavery in Suriname, in Brazil, in the southern states of the North America. Direct slavery is just as much the pivot of bourgeoisie industry as machinery, credits, etc. Without slavery, you have no cotton. Without cotton, you have no modern industry." The Union initially was not fighting the war to end slavery. Lincoln was elected on a platform of centrism and moderate opinions on the slavery question. The early years of the war involved the Union tiptoeing around the question to avoid isolating border slaveholders and causing a political stirring in the North. Marx took a different stance, saying, "The present struggle between the South and the North is therefore nothing but a conflict between two social systems, and the system of slavery is a system of free labor. It can only end with the victory of one system or the other." He was a bit ahead of the curve. Now, the disconnect between Marx's understanding and the Union's understanding plagued his writings. Marx was a supporter of the Union since the beginning of the war and worked tirelessly to advocate for them even when other radicals were undecided or pro-Confederacy, because the Union stance was that of preservation of the Union and not a fight against slavery, at least initially. Marx pushed hard for the Union to take a stronger stance against slavery. Throughout the Civil War, he constantly encouraged more radical efforts of elements within the Union. He was delighted with John C. Fremont's efforts to emancipate and arm slaves in the early years of the war. But when Lincoln rescinded Fremont's efforts and dismissed him, Marx wrote, "Should the Union government meet with more mishap, and has itself given the opposition its leader in John Fremont." He complained about the lack of revolutionary vigor in the Union. After the Union took a more hardline stance against slavery, he was elated and wrote a letter to Lincoln congratulating him for continuing the revolution. The war also helped Marx to become more engaged with the communist movement worldwide. He helped found the First International in the 1864. The Civil War was seen as an example of continued revolution, and the American flag was hoisted up to showcase this. Those who fought in the Revolution of 1848 had opinions on the Civil War, which was taking place in North America. This gave them the basis for what the fight was about, which was about slavery and free labor. Many of the old revolutionaries took sides with either the Union or the Confederacy. For example, Giuseppe Mazzini, he believed that slavery was coming to an end and he agreed with the Union. The Civil War also left Europe with a shortage of cotton, which left them economically impacted. This led to opinions that many had about slavery and the Civil War in America. There were also civil wars that happened abroad before and after in the fight for freedom of serfs. Marx, through his various literary works and contributions to numerous papers throughout the span of the war, exemplified his thoughts and opinions on the events occurring overseas in the United States. Marx expressed consistently that he believed that the Civil War and conflicts as the war approached were direct extensions of the American Revolution. He believed that the nationalism and momentum from the revolution prior was continued into the Civil War and that helped the process continue. He and his accomplice Engels both believed from the start that this event would be monumentous. They agreed that the war events would also be progressive for all rather than solely slaves. Marx also viewed the war from the point of Southern aggression, as they had the agenda of keeping their overwhelmingly political power and expanding the Southern's territory against the wishes of the North, keeping only the original 13 states to have the ability to own slaves, which in turn assisted in beginning the Civil War. Throughout the entirety of the war, Marx consistently held the same views on the subject, leading his work to follow the same path for the duration of the war. Through researching and studying the Civil War through the perspective of Karl Marx, we have been able to see the different point of view he had, looking at the war in comparison to the traditional method of study from native literature and other sources. Through Marx, we receive a foreign perspective on the war, a look from the outside to see how the events may have been seen in the view of those who weren't really indirectly involved. Having this is important as it helps give us as researchers and students a better understanding of the war by having the ability to study those events in a different light. Doing this also lends a hand to help solidify the monumental events not only in American history, but how others, Marx, perceived the battle and political turmoil. Yet another outcome of this is some learning of some new information from researching Marx and studying his narration of the war, bringing forth ideas and concepts somewhat familiar with a different twist, all contributing to a better understanding of the Civil War.